Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. It's cooling off and fall is on the way. Today we're going to talk about how to get your garden ready for this winter and next spring. Also, apples are susceptible to many diseases. We're going to show you the most common and how to prevent them. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Joellen Dimond. Joellen's Director of Landscape at the University of Memphis, and Mr. D will be joining me later. Hi, Joellen.
Yeah.
It's getting about that time, right? We have to start talking about fall.
Fall.
How about that?
Yeah, after this hot summer, it's going to be good to have some cooler temperatures.
Yes.
And football season, start thinking about time to get everything ready for the winter.
How about that? So you're going to give us some
we're going to talk about a few things.
Good deal.
And, it's still time to plant annuals. You've got parties going on, and there are still some annuals that you can plant. Well, mums, of course, mums. Those are very popular this time of year. Cabbage and kales, pansies, Dusty Miller. Celosia is one that also looks very good in the fall. You can also plant vegetables, the cool season crops. Beets, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, all the onions, some lettuces, all the cool season crops.
Okay.
They used to have a slogan, fall is the time for planting, because the soil is warm and you can plant shrubs and perennials in the ground, and since the ground is still warm, the roots will start establishing before it gets cold, and then they'll be ahead of a spring planted shrub or perennial.
Okay.
So fall is the time for planting.
Okay. Like that.
Soil pH. Yeah, we always say it's time, don't guess, soil test.
That's right.
So, and that's true. Fall is a perfect time of year to do that, because when you're going to amend the soils with either, if their test comes back and says, well, you need to add some acid to your soil because your pH is too high, so you add some type of sulfur to the soil to make it more acidic. And what if it comes back acidic and it needs to be more basic? Well, then it maybe need lime. So, but when you do that, it will take several months to change the pH in the soil. What better time than over winter when you don't have to worry about it? So in the spring, you're ready to go.
You're ready to go.
I've had a hydrangea that I have tried and been putting acid on to get a beautiful blue color, and I finally got it this year. So it's the only one of 3. So now I've got to do the same thing to the other 2. So I'll be adding some more acid to the soil this fall for them.
Okay.
And a lot of people lime their vegetable gardens or their lawns. So it's a perfect time to do that.
I would agree.
And speaking of lawns, the things you need to do to your lawn, if you have cool season grasses, it's a perfect time of year to plant seed.
Okay.
Because they like 60 to 65 degree temperatures at night to be able to germinate. So that's your fescues and your bluegrasses.
Okay.
And because it's an active time of year for these lawns to be growing, you could actually core and put amendments in your lawns for those particular varieties.
Okay.
Warm season grasses like Bermudas and Zoysias, Mahalia, St. Augustine, don't do any of the coring or anything like that, but you could add a fall fertilizer to them if you wanted to, but it's also time to overseed those. If you want a green lawn, you have Bermuda, you want a green lawn, you overseed it with perennial rye, and then you'll have green grass all winter.
Sure will.
So it's the perfect time to do all of that.
Yeah, I'd rather mine go dormant,
A lot of people,
I want to go dormant.
a lot of people are tired and they don't want to keep mowing.
Yeah.
But with the soil pH test too, you can improve your soils. I created a new garden spot this year, and I had garden mix added to it. Well, they didn't have any more, so they had just mixed it for me.
Okay.
Well, the pH was all off in it, and so it withdraw the nitrogen out of the soil to try to do the decomposition for the soil mix. And so my garden didn't do as well. Well, if I put more amendments in it this time, I would do it in the fall so that by the time spring is around, it will have done all that decomposing and it will be ready for me to plant and do a lot better. So improve your soils this time of year. Cleanup.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you can cut perennial seed heads down, but it's a nice time to collect seeds from your perennials or your annuals, whatever you want. It's a great time. When they start going to seed, you know, pick them up, put them in envelopes and put them inside in a cool place to use next spring. Okay. Clean up your vegetable garden when they start dying. Don't let them just go ahead and die in the garden. Pull them up when they're done producing and put them either, if they're diseased or have bugs, don't put them in the compost pile, simply throw them away. But you do want to clear everything out of the garden. You don't want to leave anything there in case diseases or bugs overwinter there.
That's right.
Corn stalks, you've got corn stalks left, make some fodder shocks and some fall coloring, you know, for some fall decorations with your mums, and maybe you grew pumpkins or gourds. Yeah. You know, you can harvest and use it as decorations for your yard. And of course, fall is also for planting spring blooming bulbs. Hey. Your tulips, your daffodils, your hyacinths, crocus, all of that. And when you plant them now, then they'll get the cold time that they need to initiate their blooms. All the bulbs need a cool season to initiate blooms for the spring, so there'll be plenty of time for that.
Plenty of time, okay.
Yeah. Right. And of course, you've got those beautiful tropical plants outside that you've been enjoying them on your porch. Well, you better bring them in, especially before that first frost. Make sure they don't have any bugs or diseases on them. You know, wash them off. I like to wash them off. If I've planted them in the ground, I like to dig them up. Okay. And sometimes I don't bring them in. I have a place in my garage where I try to keep them and have pretty good success with keeping some of them in the garage over winter. But if they're outside and you want them inside your house, you just got to make room for them. You might have to trim them a little bit. Just remember they're going to lose leaves because it's not as high light intensities inside as it is outside. And you might want to just make sure, some people will soak their whole container in a bucket of water, so if there's any insects in the soil, it'll come up to the top, and then you don't bring them inside, and that way you don't have to use insecticides.
Okay. Now what about watering? You know, those plants when you bring them indoors, do you need to wait to the soil?
Once you bring them inside, don't water them as much because they don't have the atmosphere, the same environment that they had outside. Okay. So watch your watering once you bring them in.
Okay, good.
And speaking of water, you know, sometimes we've had droughts in the fall, and then we'll get a frost, and then people's plants die. I remember one December, we still had not had a frost here, and so I was outside watering because I had heard we were going to have a hard freeze the next night, and the crepe myrtle still had leaves all on them. So I'm out there, you know, it's 4:30, it gets dark, so I'm out there watering in the dark my plants, and I think my neighbors thought I was crazy. But you know, I didn't lose any of my plants because they had enough water to be able to withstand the freeze that they got. Got it. Okay. So even in a drought situation, just be careful, watch the weather. And if we're having a drought in the fall and we're going to get a hard freeze, it's always good to water so that the plant has plenty of water in the system so they can take the cold. Okay,
good point. Okay. Yeah, because I wouldn't have thought of that. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
And of course, the last thing you need to do, you got to bring the hose inside. You got to bring the tools. Right. You know, drain your hoses. Make sure all of your sprinklers are drained, because if you set them up, you'll notice that sometimes your water leaks out of them. And so you just make sure everything's drained. You got to put your cushions up and your hammocks. And for fall, if you have hummingbirds, make sure the hummingbirds have food for migrating south. And if you're going to get a freeze that night, at least bring in the hummingbird feeder for that particular night before you put it back out for the hummingbirds that are flying south.
Another good point.
And of course, if you want to, you can look in your extension office and find out when they migrate through your area, so you know when to stop feeding, so they continue on their way south.
That was good, Joellen. I appreciate that. So these are some of the things you do.
I do them
as well
every year.
In your own garden. So good deal. Well, thank you much for the information.
This is an example of mummified fruit. We talk about the importance of removing mummified fruit from plants going into the winter a lot, and this is an example of mummified blackberries. Not caused by an insect or disease, caused by a human. The old weed eater. So folks, be careful with weed eaters around plants that are precious to you, especially those that have fruit that you can eat. These need to be removed. You don't have to pick them off, luckily, you don't have to pick them off one by one, because we will remove the dead cane, the entire dead cane, and we'll be very careful not to pull any of them off and let them fall to the ground. If any of them fall to the ground, we'll pick those up too and remove them. But don't need to go into the winter with these because they can harbor fungal, bad organisms, and we need to get rid of them. Burn them, put them in the trash, don't put them in your compost pile.
All right, Mr. D, let's talk about apple tree diseases. Where would you like to start with that?
I guess let's start with probably one of the most common problems that we have, and probably one of the earliest ones in the year, is fire blight.
Mm-hmm.
Fire blight is a bacterial disease. It is common during cool, wet conditions, which we have a lot of springs that are that way. Mm-hmm. And the diagnostic, and I'm using a great publication from the University of Georgia. This is a diagnostic, it's a pictorial diagnostic guide to common home orchard diseases. And so it is, I want to give full credit to the University of Georgia. And I just have the apple diseases here, and fire blight, the symptom of it that you see is, it's called a shepherd's crook. You'll have a dieback from the ends of the branches due to a bacterial canker that's on that branch. And it may be 10, 12 inches, even longer. The leaves will turn black. There'll be a crook that will develop, and they'll hang on the tree. It'll just stay on the tree. It won't fall off. This disease, very common on pears and apples, and the way you control it, if you have a history of problems, some varieties are more susceptible than others, but if you have a history of problems, then you need to spray during bloom with, actually twice, early bloom and late bloom, with an antibiotic. This is not something that's in your regular cover sprays for apples. And it's Agristrep is one, streptomycin, Agristrep 17. There's several of them out there that are listed labeled for fire blight control. So that's the way you control that, but it's got to be taken care of before you see the problem.
Okay.
When you see the problem, there's no need to do anything. Just wait till next year and try to take care of it.
Okay. So what do we need to prune out then?
You do need to prune out the dead tissue. You know, later in the year, you need to dip your pruning shears in a solution of 1 part bleach to 9 parts water, and to keep from spreading that bacterial infection to healthy tissue. Okay. And but yes, you do need to prune that out and dispose of it. Don't put it in your compost bin. Right. You need to either burn it or get rid of it. Another very, very common problem that will show up later in the year is cedar apple rust. We have a lot of cedar trees around in our area. This disease spends about it spends part of its life cycle in a cedar tree. When it's in the cedar tree, the gall, it's kind of a purplish looking gall that will erupt into a beautiful University of Tennessee orange, UT orange structure that will release spores, and the spores will travel to an apple tree, and on the apple tree you have the bright UT orange spots on the leaf of the apple tree.
All right, so how do you treat it?
Well, there's a couple of ways. You can, if you cut down all the cedar trees within about a 10 or 15 mile radius, that will be one way to control it. You'll take out the host. But a more practical way to take care of it is to follow the home orchard spray guide and for apple trees. And you spray with a solution that contains captan and malathion every 10 to 14 days, 7 to 10 days, actually during the growing season, and that will prevent that from being a problem.
Okay. Wow.
Another problem, which is very common on apple trees, is sooty, blotch, and fly speck.
Yeah, know that one.
When I grew up, I thought that all apples were supposed to have little spots on them, and this disease or diseases. It's kind of several fungal organisms that cause this. It's pretty much just on the skin of the apple.
Okay.
And you can peel it off. If you scrub it off, you can actually scrub that off, but it will reduce the shelf life of an apple. The home orchard regular cover sprays will take care of that.
Okay.
And that's again the home orchard sprays that contain malathion and captan. And the next disease I want to talk about is bitter rot, and it is a concentric circles in a rotten spot on the fruit of an apple tree. It's caused by glomerella, and it has kind of concentric rings like a target, but sometimes instead of being circular, they're kind of V-shaped, and it actually sinks into the fruit, and it goes on into the fruit. But again, the home orchard, spray guide, following the regular cover sprays with a mixture of captan and malathion, 7 to 10 days during the growing season will take care of that.
Okay. Now, is that considered to be a fungus?
It is a fungal.
It is a fungus.
It is a fungal.
Okay.
Glomerella is the fungal organism. Another real common one is black rot.
Wow.
And this is kind of a brown, starts out as like a bruised area on the blossom end or the calyx end of the apple, and then it spreads and it also goes up into the fruit. It's Botryophyria. I can't say it today, Botryophyria. Okay. But it is a fungal organism, and it can be controlled by using regular cover sprays every 7 to 10 days with fungicide captan and then malathion as an insecticide. And I'm throwing the insecticide in there because if you're going to spray with a fungicide, you may as well control the insects while you're at it.
So with the black rot and the bitter rot, I mean, the fruit is still edible.
Yes, except it gets up in the fruit. You've got to cut it out.
Yeah, cut it out.
You've got to cut it out. Unlike the fly speck or the earlier ones that were just on the skin. This will go into the fruit, and it will cause the entire. It can ruin the entire fruit, and with most of these, the fruit will hang on the tree like a mummy will hang on the tree, and sanitation is important. You need to pick those off and get rid of them. Again, don't put them in your compost bin. Put them in the Walmart bag, double bag them, get rid of them or something, and put them in the garbage. Apple scab is another very common disease, and it is present on the leaves. Sometimes it's called frog eye leaf spot. Oh, okay. But it has scabby lesions on the fruit, and it tends to be more on the skin. But it's a very common problem in apples, and it can be controlled again with a regular cover spray every 7 to 10 days. Wow. And if you get a rain and it washes it off, it's gone. You need to go back out there and do it again. It can be really hard during rain conditions. Sure. But again, the cover sprays contain captan and malathion. White rot is, again, Botryophyria. It's the same genus but a different species. Okay. It causes, and it has depressed, soft, enlarged lesions on the fruit. And it really will wipe out your fruit pretty quick. But it's more of a late season problem in apples and pears, and it becomes soft really quick. Most of the other rots, the black rot is kind of hard at first, and it takes it a while to get soft. But serious disease, sanitation again is important. Remove the mummified apples that are hanging on the tree, but prevent it from occurring by using a home orchard spray guide and regular cover sprays with a material that contains captan or malathion. Wow. And that's the main. Those are the main ones. Apple diseases that we see, and we see all of these in here in the Mid-South. Yeah, do we have that here? We see them all in the Mid-South. We sure do. Wow. Appreciate that good information, Mr. D. Not much. Thank you. Yep.
The Asclepias or milkweed has gone to seed, and we can let this just fly everywhere and put milkweed seeds everywhere, or you can start collecting them. See, these have come here, and they're You can collect them with these, or you can take the seeds off of them and just collect the seeds by themselves. Yeah, they're very easy to collect, especially at this stage when they're about to fly away with the wind. But you end up with some seeds that you can save and plant in the spring in a different place. You can store these in an envelope and put them in your refrigerator, or you can just put them in a cool, dry place. And then in the spring, when the temperatures warm up, plant them outside.
All right, here's our Q&A segment. Y'all ready?
Yes.
These are great questions. Here's our first viewer email. Hi, how do you get rid of English ivy? I applied Roundup this summer, but that did not work. I pull what I can, but there are places where it grows that I can't get to. Thank you. And this is Barbara from Manalapan, New Jersey. So she's trying to get rid of English ivy, Joellen. You know a little something about that.
She's doing a good job. With, you know, mechanical is one of the best ways. Okay. But if Roundup, of course, is not. Glyphosate is not working. Try the brush killer, which is like a Tripliclear. Yeah. Try a different mode of action, and it might help. But you just make sure you just spot spray it on that, because you don't want it to get it on anything else in your garden.
This is what I do, Mr. D. You tell me what you think. So I would go early in the spring with glyphosate product, because the English ivy has not yet developed the waxy cuticle.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Then you have to reapply again, maybe 4 to 6 weeks later, or go out there with a lawnmower, weed eater. You can mow over it, and then you get the new growth,
which hasn't developed the waxy cuticle.
Glyphosate, yeah.
Another thing, you may want to use a stronger solution of glyphosate.
Okay. All right.
I looked at some research that had been done comparing glyphosate with triclopyr, and glyphosate worked better when they used the 41% material, at least a 41% material, and a 4% solution, which most of the ready-to-use product that you buy probably are only 2 to 3% solutions. Got it. Yeah. So if you do that, do it when the leaves are young. Multiple applications. The glyphosate tends to work, but it's only in the springtime, or in the later on, like you said, if you cut it off and have the new growth that comes out. But mechanical is what I do, and I have a lot of English ivy on my property, and where it's growing, I need it. I mean, it's good in the shade. It's good in highly erodible areas, but I don't need it up the trees and things like that. And so I mechanically remove that, and it's something to see when you have a tree that's been covered with English ivy.
I've seen that
for years, and you go around into the tree, and they say you can't get pruning shears under it. You have to use a screwdriver to do that. My lopping shears, I can hook my lopping shears around them and cut most of them off with heavy-duty lopping shears. Wow. And then once you do that one time, they start up your tree again. Next year, you just use hand shears. Just walk around the tree and cut them off and let it grow along the base of the tree, and
it works.
And she's got the right idea if she's done it mechanically, and eventually you're going to get rid of the carbohydrates in the ground, and it will stop coming up. But that's going to take a lot longer.
It's going to be some work, Ms. Barbara. We appreciate the question. Do read and follow the label, on the herbicide that you will be using. All right? All right, thank you much. Here's our next viewer email. Help! I have white flies and spider mites on my herbs and in my vegetable garden. Tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant. How can I get rid of white flies in a way that I can still safely eat my vegetables and herbs? Thanks. And this is Miss Ann. All right, Mr. D. We got to get rid of those white flies, but we got to do them safely, right?
Yeah,
because she wants to eat.
Right.
And herbs and vegetables.
And she started out saying white flies and mites.
And spider mites.
And then she said white flies.
Then she said, yep.
Right. So they're two different critters.
Okay.
White flies are an insect. Mites are not.
Right.
They're. The first thing I look at is what will work give you some help for both of them. And I would probably lean toward the horticultural oils and soaps. Horticultural oils and soaps, they're listed for both the whiteflies and the mites. If you continue to have problems and one is worse than the other, bifenthrin is an insecticide that's listed for whitefly control on vegetables. And then kelthane is a miticide that's listed for mites. So if one or the other continues to be a problem after you try the treatment that works for both of them, the horticultural oils and soaps, then treat them with a rifle. You know, whichever one is the problem, you treat with the product that's recommended for it.
And you know what might help is yellow sticky traps. Because if it's white, if it's the flies, it'll get stuck on the sticky trap, and then she'll know that's what her problem she has.
Right.
If they don't, and she still has problems, and you need to look under the leaves, and that's
Then
probably
you need a
where the
magnifying
mites are
glass.
got.
Yeah.
You might need,
But
that's
the
that's
mites
probably
aren't
where.
gonna fly away.
Right.
No, no, they're not going to fly away.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, again, yeah, the oils, yeah, the soaps,
Yeah.
yeah, but then that doesn't control it. Yeah.
Heavy artillery.
Wow. How about that? All right. Thank you for the question, Ms. Ann. We appreciate that. And Mr. D. Joellen, we're out of time. That was fun. Thank you
good.
much. All right. Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is familyplot@wkno.org, and the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. Every week we answer more viewer questions than we can air. We don't want them to go to waste, so we put the rest of them on familyplotgarden.com for you to watch. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.